Hello, welcome back to Dr. Introspect TV, and it's your host, Dr. Introspect, and I am back. I'm coming to you with another podcast style video, and I know, it's been a hot minute since I dropped a video, but I promise this will be worth the wait. I don't know what I'm going to be titling this video just yet, but it was something that was recommended to me by one of you guys, so this is a shout out to you, Tony. And of course, if you guys have other recommendations, let us know. And so this is actually a first for the channel. I've usually done season deep dives, movie deep dives. I've done seasons worth, like 1 to 5. For example, the Umbrella Academy video. Awesome video if you haven't seen that. And today I'm going to be doing character analysis, and this is not something I've done before exclusively on the channel. I sometimes touch up on it briefly when I do the whole deep dives, exploring the storylines and the plot and the thematic analysis. But now we're going to be doing just a character analysis, and I think this is because this is a character that I am genuinely intrigued and curious about, and this was the character that was specifically mentioned in that comment, and so I think it's worth exploring. There's a lot to learn here, and yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. If you are listening, if you are often listening, if you're just listening for the first time and you enjoy this, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, because the algorithm sometimes won't remind you if you don't do that. So you want to remember when I post, especially since I don't really have a schedule of something, and you might just miss something really, really good. Okay, so enough of the intro, let's get into it. So the topic of today is actually about the psychological aspects of villains in storytelling, specifically these villains. So I'm using them as a case study. And the main character I'll be exploring is Homelander from The Boys, the Amazon series. And I might touch on some other ones as well as we go on, but Homelander is the main person. And so the other show is actually called Invincible, and the characters I will be looking at in that show are Omniman and his son, Invincible. And with that being said, let's start with Homelander. Now, Homelander is the leader of the superhero group called Super 7, and he is the strongest Soup. They call them Soup, so I will call him Soup as well. And he is the arch enemy of another character who gives off an anti-hero vibes called the Butcher. And some of his origins: he was actually raised in a lab. They extracted some semen from another superhero who was also the strongest Soup of his own squad. He was called Soldier Boy, and they used his semen, they inserted it into a homeless woman who carried him to term, and he lasered himself out of her belly during labor and unalived 3 doctors in the process. He was created in this scientific facility by an organization called the Vault, so that he could be the ultimate superhero, but not just the ultimate, the controllable superhero. So you see, the person that was Soldier Boy, that we would say is his father, since he was his, donor, was very strong, but he was not controllable. And so that's an issue you can often have with like very powerful people. You want someone that, yes, they are extremely powerful, but you need them to be controlled, because with so much power, there's a lot of power to give someone. You want to have a lot of power, but you want to know that they can pull back if you say pull back, and so they created him literally in the lab, and then they did sequence multiple psychological interventions to kind of shape him and mold him into the kind of superhero they wanted him to be. And as we go on, you're going to see how this played out into his life in the future. And so this ties into the whole point of this video, because for him, Homelander, like many other malignant, malevolent characters, who we identify as villains, they are often created from abuse in their childhood. And so the kind of training that was done for him specifically was an intermittent reinforcement. That kind of trained him to not just crave, but also want validation. The word validation here is key, because it is not love he is seeking, it is validation. That was what was wired into him, and by validation, it's you're a good boy, you did well, things like that. Now, if someone loves you, validation is a part of that. But when you just have validation and you don't have the other aspects of love, where there's acceptance, there's vulnerability, there's security, there's safety, all of those things, you don't have love, okay? And so because that's what Homelander was raised with, that is always what he seeks out, and that is always what he craves. He's not craving love, he's craving validation. And so, we have a person that is constantly seeking this validation. And what that creates is a character that is very, very narcissistic. So he definitely is full on the NPD spectrum, diagnosable narcissist, full on there. But he also has aspects of psychopathy. And where you see that is in how he views human beings. He views human beings as disposable. He views them as like toys, like playthings. There's no emotion, there's no empathy, there's also no regret with anything he does. I think in season 1, we see him let a plane kind of drop with all the people innocent in it, being unalived. We see how he manipulates situations, for himself. And he doesn't care about the collateral damage. He doesn't care about the people he hurts. We will find out later as the seasons progress that he actually has a son. And his son is like preteen years by the time we get to meet him. And the way that child was created was actually in a space of violence, because he violated the mother, who also happens to be Butcher's wife. And so that's a lot of where the hatred for him, Butcher's hatred for Homelander, really, really stands strong. The fact that, he did this, tore up his family, all of these things. And that child kind of grew up in a secluded area far away from him. He didn't even know about the child's existence for all those years. And so you see this recurrent pattern of, these very strong, powerful people growing up in this very isolated environments that can really influence how they shape out to be. As you watch season 1, it's very evident the amount of narcissism, and it must be interesting to be both a narcissist and psychopath at the same time, because the human beings you despise so much, you also rely on them for the validation. Homelander is so obsessed with his image. In season 2, his image takes a big hit, and he aligns with Stormfront because he hopes that she can help him build his image. There's a lot that Homelander is willing to do to look good in the eyes of other people. Unlike other psychopaths that are just psychopaths without the narcissism, they might have some traits, but full on for both, he has to still rely on those human beings he hates. When you think about other psychopaths, like someone like the guy from Silence of the Lambs, right? Hannibal. He eats people. He's not like depending on them for attention. If they say he's ugly, if they say he's a bad person, it doesn't affect his ego. It doesn't do anything to him. The opposite of that is the case for Homelander. In fact, Homelander is so invested in his image that by the time we get to the recent season, we see the kind of issue he has with the fact that he is aging, and he's capable of aging. His hair is turning grey, and it's not just on his head, it's down there as well. And we see how he has issues reconciling with that. And so for him, he has to look the best. He has to be the strongest. He has to have all the adulation and, attention and validation of all the people worshipping him, seeing him as the ultimate best. And I think that aspect of him, it doesn't humanize him. It actually weakens him, because unlike other psychopaths, like the one I'm actually going to dive into next, this aspect of Homelander is what makes him a weaker villain, in my opinion. And so the next person I'm going to talk about now and compare him to is actually the guy from Invincible, Omniman. So when the show came out, it came out around the time when there were many other superhero spin-off type shows or movies coming out. And that PP word era, when we were inside, I can't say that word because of YouTube, a lot of the shows were out and they were thriving. And I remember the first time I saw Invincible, my mind was just blown, because the first episode, you have this man that is, I would say, equivalent, as powerful as Homelander. So Homelander's power is like Superman, Superman, but without like holding back. If Superman wasn't holding back, I would say that's how I think they imagine Homelander to be. And Omni-Man is also a version of like what you think that greatest superhero Superman is. And in that universe, that Omni-Man universe, that Invincible Amazon series universe, he is the strongest person, and we see him just take out all the members of his team, and it's just like mind-blowing, like how. And here Omni-Man is a dad. He has a son who's a teenager, who the show is named after, Invincible, and he is the epitome of perfection. He is a recognized superhero. He works with the government. He has a wife. He's a loyal husband. You know, he has a son. He's an involved parent, an involved dad. Like, you can't say anything bad about him. And then this scene happens, and we see him live this double life of where he still continues to parade himself as this really good person. And then you find out that, oh no, he is actually kind of sort of a spy, because he is an alien, right? So unlike the Vault story where these soups are created in the Amazon Prime series, he's actually an alien that visited Earth, and he pretended for all these years, settled, married this woman, had children, had a child with her, and was like, you know, doing this thing for years. And, you know, he pretended and camouflaged himself to be this person that is trying to bring about intergalactic peace, you know, trying to, you know, help the Earth have peace and, you know, things to be good, so fight all the bad guys. Meanwhile, he is the original bad guy. Like, how do you stay undercover all these years? So this kind of comparison I'm talking about, where if you just have psychopathy alone, you can grind it out and fulfill the plan. And what the plan was for him to kind of infiltrate the Earth, weaken their systems, and ready them for his other colleagues to come over and destroy the planet. And it's like a long-term type of plan, long game. And so we are watching the whole story unfold in season 1, and it's time to execute, you know, the plan. And he just goes rogue for the people on Earth, but not rogue because this is actually phase 2 of the plan, and he now has to fight everyone. And his son is the one that is standing between him and his father. And even though his son gets his genes and gets some of his powers, he is in no way, shape or form, in any capacity, strong enough to take on Omniman. So how was Omniman created? So Omniman's an alien, and he comes from a planet of psychopaths. Yes. So when I heard how that planet works, and people just fight and they just kill each other, and to be vulnerable is weak, if you are unalived in battle, I guess you just weren't strong enough, you deserve to go. They have this very brute force, very dismissive, emotional, dismissive attitude. Basically, opposition of anything you've ever heard in mental health space that's supposed to be good. They're anti-nurturing, they're anti-vulnerability, they're anti-emotional safety. Emotions, period. Talk less about safety. And that's where he comes from. And when, you know, we got to that aspect of the series and I saw that, I'm like, okay, that explains everything. There's no hope for this guy. He came into a kill or be killed type of world, and that's how everyone there is. So to be different means to basically be unalived. And so it is actually a form of abuse that's happening. It's just happening on a national scale in that planet. It's just the way of life for you to be abused your entire childhood and for the rest of your life. That indoctrination is just the status quo. So you can definitely see the commonalities of abuse creating malignant, and malevolent characters between Homelander and Omniman. The difference is there isn't that aspect of narcissism. There isn't this intermittent reinforcement to create a vacuum of validation that causes you to constantly seek it and crave it. He doesn't have that. And because he doesn't have that, when he turns on the world and they now call him a bad guy, it doesn't matter. He doesn't care that everyone is calling him a bad guy. He doesn't care about how his family is looking at him now, that they think he has betrayed them. The wife, her mind is blown that all this time she was just like a pet to him, because that's how he described her, like a pet he had all these years. Like both of them were just pets. A lot of people love their pets actually, but there's no love in that relationship he has in that family. He's just acting. He's just pretending to be this person, this quote unquote dad, husband, good father. This is just part of his role, for the master plan. And so dysfunction and dysfunctional situations create dysfunctional people. But now let's look at his son, Invincible. What's different about his son? People often say that there is nature and there's nurture. With Omniman and his child, we do have the nature of, the genes. He sired him naturally, and that child has part of his DNA and has pretty much all of his powers. Just he's human. And so there's often the question of, if someone has, things in your brain that are wired in certain ways that already can predispose them to psychopathy, are there interventions that can be done in their childhood and raising them that can in any way change the course of their future? I would say that's a conversation that is abound in the literature by scholars and practitioners alike. What can you do? You have a child that has exhibited certain things, and there are ways to catch these things. That's why mental health interventions are so crucial. You can see certain disorders. You can't diagnose a child as a psychopath, but there are other oppositional defiance disorders, conduct disorder, those things that if you don't get a handle of while they're 12, while they're 10, it could continue to grow into more significant things as they get older. But when we look at Omniman's child, Invincible is a well-adjusted kid. And by the time we get to the more recent season, I think season 3 or so, the whole story of that season is just him battling with the reality or possibility of him turning into his dad. And he's a child, you can't help that, As children, their identities, even though he's a teenager, his identity is still forming. And so you can't help but see aspects of your parent in yourself. And if your parent happens to be someone that is a bad person, then you start to see yourself as bad. So there's a lot of this fear he has within him about him being a bad person, him turning into his dad. Like he has all his dad's powers, so he could do things like him. And so he's second guessing himself, he's second guessing his decisions, he's afraid of becoming evil and becoming bad. But that aside, when you see his upbringing, because Omniman was able to pretend to be a good father and wear the mask of a good dad, as psychopaths do. You know, the psychopaths that unalive people and come back home to their wives and family and still, you know, host Thanksgiving and bake and grill and, you know, celebrate the 4th of July like it's just a normal day, even though they just like buried some people in the yard. That kind of psychopath, that's how Omniman was. So he was able to pretend to be a good dad and model the ideal behaviors of what a good father is. But at the same time, I think a bulk of the work, because he was always traveling, fighting bad aliens and bad people all over the place, so a bulk of that nurturing work fell to his mom. And Invincible's mom, I think, played the greatest role in creating that safe space, that nurturing space for him to evolve. I mean, granted, he is still growing and he's just a teenager, as we've found out in the show, as we've met him, but so far so good. It has created the space for him to be a well-adjusted person. And we see a lot of that in the most recent season, when we see how he navigates his first emotional relationship. I mean, seeing that season made me want to come here and do a deep dive on that show, because I always recognize when a show does a good job modeling healthy attachment patterns in relationships. And for him to have this very deep relationship as a freshman in college and manage the difficulty of that relationship while still doing his superhero job, where he has to like fly across the world and do his job while still being a student, you know, full time, taking classes, and then still grieving the loss of his dad, whom he had to fight. And it was in that fight, I think he was probably near the point of being unalived when his dad stopped punching and kind of left. I think in that particular scene, that scene was so impactful, and it was in the last episode of that season. It was so impactful. You're wondering what exactly happened there. I feel like something turned in Omniman's brain, and this is not to say that this happens for, you know, real life psychopaths. Don't go thinking you can turn one, okay? You're not professional, and even the people working with them will tell you it just doesn't happen like that. So let's just believe in the world of fiction that something turned while he was about to take the last breath of his son. He experienced something I would say I would liken to shame. And that is not an emotion that psychopaths have. I think he felt shame, and that's why when he stopped, he fled. He literally just flew out of the earth and just went somewhere far away, and then they didn't see him for a long time, maybe a year, I don't know, can't remember the timelines. But and when he fled, he went to this planet that was full of like people that were like insects, like roaches type people, or ants, I don't know, I can't remember. But he went there, and instead of like processing his grief. Again, I understand it's not a skill that he has because he wasn't raised that way, he wasn't given those tools, so he was just doing something else, you know. He went there and started this family with these insects that don't live for like more than 2 weeks or something. So he married the queen and they had a baby, and he was trying to be a good dad that he couldn't be while he was on Earth, kind of trying to have a second chance. When he could come back to Earth and pay for his crimes, apologize to his family, right those wrongs, actually like do the right thing, this is kind of a form of escapism, you know, and he's also not really dealing with the actual grief that he needs to deal with. So this whole shenanigan, he doesn't know what has happened to his dad, he doesn't know whether he's dead. Invincible is grieving all of this and still navigating the relationship. So him being able to do all of that and have the maturity, the emotional maturity to have these like difficult conversations, you know, I commend his mom. I highly commend her because that's all her. She molded that boy and shaped him into who he is. Now let's compare Invincible to Homelander's son, right? So Homelander's son has been growing up in a faraway place. Notice the difference. Invincible grew up having a normal life. He went to school, public school, you know, he had friends, he had classmates. He got to interact with people. Now, this is not to say that people who don't interact with people will turn out as, you know, psychopaths. That's not what I'm saying. But I want to point out that there is definitely that difference in the upbringing of both of them. So Homelander's child kind of grew up like him, but not as harsh, because at least he had his mom. He had his mom with him for the period of time, and he was somewhat a normal kid, you know, had a little bit of powers, but a normal kid. He had his mom. Now for Homelander grew up in a lab. He was full of scientists. In fact, in the last season that we saw, it's very easy for you to feel empathetic towards him, even though he's like a really big bad villain, because they really explore his origin story in a way. We see that to do these tests on him to see how strong he is, or to see how far he can withstand the temperature or whatever, he was put in horrible conditions. Imagine being put in a boiling room to see what will happen to your skin if they turn up the heat to 100 degrees. What happens? Like, do you disintegrate or do you bear it? And we can say, well, he's a superhero, he had powers, he didn't die. It doesn't change the fact that the pain and the trauma from the pain, and again, it's happening to a child, that is already creating permanent scars and damage in his psyche. And so it's almost inevitable for him to turn out the way he turned out. So Homelander's son does not have that going on. He doesn't have people running tests on him like he's in a lab. He's just in a very enclosed space. And I think he would have continued to be a sort of normal boy had Homelander not gotten involved. Now, unlike Omniman, who pretended to be a normal, regular, quote-unquote good dad, Homelander is himself. And in season 2 of The Boys, Homelander discovers that he had a son, Ryan, and he desperately wants to get him and find him and raise him. He wants his son And you know, this is something we can all connect to. Everybody feels like they can do a better job raising a child than their parents did. They feel like their parents messed up so badly that if they have kids, they can't imagine they can bear someone else just doing the job that they think they can do better. So that's something you can connect Homelander to. With Homelander, when you feel that desperation that he just wants to get his son, you're like, wow, this is a good dad. You know, you think about men that are trying to fight for custody, you can connect to that, you can relate to that. And so he wants his son to be strong like him, and he knows there's no one else that can show his son strength and how to harness that strength other than him, because no one else is as strong as him. No one else has gone through what it is like to be a teenager and be very strong. So you can connect to that, right? But it's so much more. It's so much more than that, because children can be a source of validation for narcissists as well. In fact, other than pets, they are they are like a premium juicy source, because children idolize their parents. They look up to them. They see them as not just gods because you depend on them and everything, but most children, their parents are like everything. They're in awe of them. You know, dad jumps up and it's like, oh wow, look how high dad jumps. So it's like constant validation. And you know, he's already at a point in season 2 where his image is suffering in the eye of the public, and that validation source from the public is already withering and is shaky. And then the person that runs Vault is another source of validation, because when he goes and he does something well, the person says, you know, good job. You know, that good job is just amazing. He's not getting that anymore. And so the possibility of having this child, you know, look at him with all of this adoration is so tantalizing. He can't miss out on that. And that's something I really want to emphasize, because it's very easy to get caught up in the desperation and, you know, your mutual connection to the character as a parent, that you miss out on this other sinister aspect of the narcissism. So what happens when he gets his son? We start to notice changes in Ryan. And Ryan lost his mom too, so in the process of this fight to get him, the mom is unalived. And I think it was an accident, and so he blames himself. He's a child, okay? That's what children do. They center themselves and they blame themselves. So he is blaming himself for this. So he's also dealing with that grief. And I would say they should have gotten him some kind of support in the form of a therapist or something. But they didn't give that to him. And it's not surprising, because Homelander is very controlling. The idea of someone else filling his son's head with something else, someone other than him, he can't handle. We also notice, we see this very clearly in the last season, that Homelander is also extremely jealous. Anytime he finds out that the butcher sent a letter or something, even though he understands that the butcher has a connection to the boy actually knew the butcher first before him, he is not wanting that connection. So just picture someone who is a dad that has custody but doesn't want the stepdad who's now married to the wife to have anything to do with the child, of which is kind of not possible. especially if both of them live in the same household. That's not the situation in this story, but there is this level of jealousy, and Ryan is not a child anymore by season 4 or 5, I can't remember, the latest season. He's not a child anymore. Like, he's still a child, but he is kind of growing into his teenage years, so he has some level of autonomy, you know. He can decide what he wants to do and what he doesn't want to do. But Homelander being a very controlling person, I don't see him even letting the boy individuate, which is another issue you have in narcissists. I don't see him letting the boy come into his own, come into his identity, grow into his own adulthood, given that level of control he needs to have on the boy. And it's not like this healthy like boundaries a parent has with their child. No, it is control. And when Homelander doesn't get his way, you know, he throws a fit like he always does. And you can dismiss it as just someone being angry when he does it among other adults. But when you see Homelander trashing his house, trashing his son's room, creating a very unsafe environment just because he got a letter from Butcher, that's when you know, okay, this is very unhealthy. So he's creating this very unhealthy space, and again, this boy is living with him. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. He doesn't have anywhere else he probably feels safe. You know, he's a soup as well, and there's a whole thing about hating the soups going out in the public world. You start to see how he is capitulating, walking on eggshells. You can see how he is just obviously moderating himself because he doesn't want Homelander to fly into a rage and then do something to him. He is trying to do these little ways to control his safety in that environment. Ryan actually feels very unsafe. And then you have the Butcher as well, where he doesn't feel like he can trust him. He doesn't feel like he can trust that other lady that's a head of security that tried to chain him and lock him in the room. He doesn't feel like there's anywhere to turn to. So in the end, he still goes back to his dad, Homelander. Right? Even though that place is not a safe space either. Homelander is feeding Ryan with thoughts about how human beings are just playthings. You know, he's teaching him how to erase any sense of guilt or remorse. And so when Ryan accidentally kills someone, he kind of makes him think that it shouldn't matter. He should have no remorse or guilt about it, because human beings are like ants. Their lives are worthless. They are worthless. You know, we can crush them. We are strong. They only exist for our own entertainment. So this is some psychopathy that he's trying to influence into his son. And over time, we start to see that happen. And he is so evil in the sense that when he saw the first way he was going about it wasn't working, he did it differently. And we saw that in the scene where the son saw someone, a producer in their filming area, making an employee or intern or someone uncomfortable. And it was just such a, what would I call it? Like, it gave the vibe of such extreme sadism. That moment was such a pivotal moment. It was such a pivotal moment that you can tell that he is succeeding in breaking Ryan and turning him into the kind of evil person he wants to turn him into. And Ryan intervenes from a noble place. he speaks to the lady, is this man making you uncomfortable? And she says, yes. So he makes the man apologize. He makes the man kneel down. And what ensues was just, I can't remember if she made him hit him and just keep hitting him. And that was just too far. And he was watching and he was enjoying it. So it's like, okay, this is too far, It's like you have people that are like, I want to do the right thing. And he knows that Ryan wants to do the right thing. Ryan wants to help. And then you just nudge them to do something really evil in the process of trying to do the right thing. And because he's still a kid, it's like, how far is too far? Okay, you're slapping him and you're hitting him back, but if you think about superheroes that are like trying to capture the villains, right? And I think that's that line that people like Superman are always like aware of, like, I capture you, but if in the process of capturing you I break your bones and I nearly kill you, I stopped you from robbing a bank, but now I have like pulled your guts out and you're in so much pain. Have I not gone too far? You're basically using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. But in the world of Homelander, it doesn't matter, because flies are flies. They're irrelevant. They're bothersome insects that are irrelevant. If one dies, who cares? So who cares whether I use a sledgehammer to kill a fly? But Ryan is still in formative years and he doesn't understand that. So that scene was pivotal, and depending on how the story continues to unfold in other seasons, Ryan is at a point where all that's holding him back right now from going full on evil, given the environment he is in under Homelander's tutelage, the fear and the feeling of mistrust he has for everyone, including Butcher. Like, everyone does not feel like a safe space. He just might turn out like his dad. And I think that's the scariest thing for someone like Butcher. For Butcher, that's the scariest thing for him, to imagine that sweet boy turn out to be another Homelander. And he wrestles with that thought. He wrestles with that feeling. And I'd say even somewhat guilt, because he probably also feels guilty that his wife was unalived. And maybe if she was still alive, he could have continued to have a nurturing environment. And so he wrestles with the decision of, if it comes to it, I might have to take this kid out just to make sure he doesn't turn into his horrible father. And the only time you can take him out is now, because he's not yet quite as strong as his horrible father. And if he turns into a full adult and he is evil, there's no stopping him then, right? But then he also has this glimpse of hope that he just might turn out right. And if he just turns out right, then that would be an amazing force for good. Because imagine having all this power, the possibility of that potential, but on the good side, you would have another Invincible. So that's really something to think about, something to reflect on, something to think about. A lot of what makes villains is really a collection of the experiences and how they internalize those experiences in their childhood. There are a lot of people who go through bad things but don't turn into bad people, okay? But it is almost impossible to find a very bad person that didn't go through the most horrible and sinister things. And so we often have that element of compassion, and we can have compassion given those experiences, while still holding them accountable for the choices they are making in present time. Whether that is, being a Homelander terrorizing people, or that is, being an Omniman trying to destroy the world. Homelander is really an interesting case because he is that unique combination of what it means to be both a psychopath and a narcissist. He wants everyone in the room to answer to him, yet when they all do, he's angry. Like, he can't be satisfied. He's angry that, oh, well, it's not genuine. They're only answering to me because they're afraid of me. But then he doesn't create a culture that is not surrounded by fear, because he still enjoys the fact that they are afraid of him, and he feeds off that as well. It's quite interesting. Homelander also has no loyalties. He will throw you under the bus as soon as, you don't serve his plan anymore. He'll be done with you. The way he did with the girl in the last season that has, like, the smartest brain, the black girl. Tossed her out, spat her out. And if you're someone that has been involved in a narcissist, you know what it feels like to just be discarded. But Omniman did that too, the way he discarded his family and just moved on to execute phase 2 of the plan. No feeling of emotion when they do things like this. But unlike Omniman, Homelander doesn't have that ability to, I would say he is probably a bit more neurotic. He is a bit more neurotic than Omniman. Omniman has this coolness to him. Being able to stay still, see something through, and follow the plan. So I think that that's a trait most psychopaths test very low for neuroticism. But Homelander does not have the level of neuroticism that Omniman has. Because in the moment, depending on the situation, and yes, there's situations where we see that he wants to do something horrible, like wipe out all the human beings that are booing him, and he thinks about it, he revels in that thought, but he doesn't do it. But there are like other situations where he does mess things up, like fiddling with the plan of that really brilliant woman, because he just needs to get that validation. He just needs to, get what he wants when he wants it, without the slow pace thing involved. And so that comes to the end of this analysis. So it's like a 2-in-1. I touched on 2 shows, and if you haven't seen these shows, this is something great for you to binge for the next week or the next weekend. Come in, just go to your Amazon Prime or wherever you watch your shows and watch Invincible. highly recommend this story. And go and see The Boys. There's so many interesting characters. It's cool. Storytelling is cool. And of course, the mental health aspects that I like to focus on in my videos are very obvious. And there's so many lessons you can pick up from them. And with that, I come to the end of this video. I look forward to other recommendations from you. I look forward to your thoughts in the comment section. Leave your recommendations in the comment section as well. And I hope you like this video, as in press the like button. It really helps the channel and it lets the algorithm know that this is a great video and it should share it with other people like you who just might enjoy it. So with that, I say goodbye. I love you. Love yourselves too. Goodbye.